In addition to that FBI investigation hurdle for Kavanaugh and his Supreme Court nomination, there's also another last hurdle for Kavanaugh, which is starting to emerge as maybe a real math problem for the prospects of him actually getting voted through the Senate whenever it is they finally take the vote. And that actually isn't directly related to the sexual assault allegations against Kavanaugh. It's the issue of Kavanaugh's behavior before the Senate during the confirmation process, and specifically when he was fielding that sexual assault allegation from Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. What is emerging on that front are two areas of concern about whether or not Judge Kavanaugh should be on the court. His truthfulness under oath about everything from his past drinking habits to his high school nickname, to his work in the George W. Bush administration on controversial nominations and controversial issues that he's denied ever playing a role in, but the documents seem to indicate otherwise. I mean, those concerns about his truthfulness under oath and whether he has misled senators during the confirmation process, those concerns started before sexual assault allegations were ever leveled against Judge Kavanaugh. But they got much worse thereafter because of how he handled himself under oath while denying that allegation. And in addition to those questions about his honesty under oath, there is this related problem that he now has, which is starting to look like it may be the single most difficult hurdle for Judge Kavanaugh if he still sees himself as on the way to the Supreme Court.
To be a good judge and a good umpire, it's important to have the proper demeanor. Really important, I think, to walk in the other's shoes, whether it be the other litigants, the litigants in the case, the other judges, to understand them, to keep our emotions in check, to be calm amidst the storm. On the bench, to put it in the vernacular, don't be a jerk. I think that's important. To be a good umpire and a good judge, don't be a jerk.
That was Judge Kavanaugh speaking in 2015 at the law school at Catholic University. A longer transcript of that speech was just published by reporter David Korn at Mother Jones Magazine. That speech from 2015 was already a little bit famous because that's the speech where Judge Kavanaugh veered off script a little bit and said, what happens at Georgetown Prep stays at Georgetown Prep, and that's been a good thing for all of us. And that got a flurry of attention last week. But in that same speech, Kavanaugh goes on and on about how important it is for a judge to, quote, keep our emotions in check, to be calm, to have the proper demeanor. All this stuff about how a judge must comport himself or herself if he or she actually wants to be part of the federal judiciary at every level.
Let me run through what I think a judge as umpire means. First, and probably most obviously, not being a political partisan. You have to check those political allegiances at the door when you become a judge. You have to shed them. It's very important at the outset for a judge who wants to be an umpire to avoid any semblance of that partisanship, of that political background, of that background they might have had in a particular line of work. That's the first, probably most fundamental thing for a judge who wants to be an umpire.
That is Brett Kavanaugh's own standard for what the fundamentals are of a judicial temperament. And of course, this is Judge Kavanaugh's own display of his would-be judicial temperament before the United States Senate.
The behavior of several of the Democratic members of this committee at my hearing a few weeks ago was an embarrassment. But at least it was just a good old-fashioned attempt at borking. Those efforts didn't work. When I did at least okay enough at the hearings that it looked like I might actually get confirmed, a new tactic was needed. Some of you were lying in wait and had it ready. You've tried hard. You've given it your all. No one can question your effort. But your coordinated and well-funded effort to destroy my good name and destroy my family will not drive me out. What goes around comes around. This has destroyed my family and my good name. A good name built up through decades of very hard work and public service at the highest levels of the American government. This whole two-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that has been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons.
Whether or not that display from Brett Kavanaugh at his confirmation hearing is unnerving to you or not in terms of what you expect from a Supreme Court justice, number one, it very much violates Kavanaugh's own explicit standards for how a judge should behave, for what constitutes judicial temperament. And number two, the way that he behaved seems now to be bugging even some Republican senators. Here's new audio we've just got in tonight. This is reporter Liz Ruskin from Alaska Public Media talking with Alaska Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski about Kavanaugh's demeanor before the Senate. Again, this is tape that we obtained from Alaska Public Media, but I believe this is the first time this tape has been broadcast.
Were you disturbed by the partisan statements that he made?
I was surprised by the very direct partisan statements that were made, some of which were confrontational. I was surprised to see that.
Lisa Murkowski speaking to Alaska Public Media. By now, you may have also seen Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake's remarks on the same topic.
I was very troubled by the tone of the remarks. The initial defense that Judge Kavanaugh gave was something like I told my wife, I hope that I would sound that indignant if I felt that I was unjustly, maligned. But then it went on, and the interaction with the members was sharp and partisan, and that concerns me. And I tell myself, you give a little leeway because of what he's been through. But on the other hand, we can't have this on the court. We simply can't.
So Senator Jeff Flake and Senator Lisa Murkowski both now expressing concern about whether Brett Kavanaugh is displaying the kind of temperament and demeanor that should be expected of a would-be Supreme Court justice. Senator Susan Collins of Maine is another closely watched vote on the Kavanaugh nomination. She has not weighed in personally on this particular aspect of Kavanaugh's behavior thus far, but this is the editorial view of her hometown paper on this subject in Maine. You see the headline there. Quote, Brett Kavanaugh has shown he doesn't belong on the Supreme Court. The man who testified Thursday can't control his temper. He is overtly partisan, and he doesn't always tell the truth. Quote, regardless of what questions the investigation can answer, we already know this. Based on what he demonstrated in his own testimony, Kavanaugh lacks the character and judgment to serve on the Supreme Court. In his widely watched appearance, Kavanaugh revealed that he has an explosive temper and resorts to bullying when he feels threatened. He was understandably under stress and fighting a high-stakes battle for his reputation. But his temperament was tested during the hearing, and he failed the test. We have never had a Supreme Court nominee who ripped off the nonpartisan mask the way Kavanaugh did Thursday and identified himself as an enemy of a political party that represents the policy preferences of millions of Americans. He blamed his predicament on bizarre conspiracy theories, claiming that his trouble stemmed from pent-up anger about President Trump and opponents seeking revenge on behalf of the Clintons. After his partisan rant, Kavanaugh will never be able to judge a case without the animus he expressed being considered a factor in his decision. This is not the road we want to take. Again, that is coming from the hometown paper and the Portland Press Herald, which is read by necessity and presumably avidly by hometown Senator Susan Collins of Maine. Tonight, I should also tell you, just before we got on the air, that the New York Times published this letter that is signed by over 650 U.S. law professors, quote, and counting. Quote, judicial temperament is one of the most important qualities of a judge. As the Congressional Research Service explains, a judge requires a personality that is even-handed, unbiased, impartial, courteous yet firm, and dedicated to a process, not a result. At the Senate hearings on September 27th, Judge Brett Kavanaugh displayed a lack of judicial temperament that would be disqualifying for any court, and certainly for the elevation to the highest court of this land. Quote, we have differing views about the other qualifications of Judge Kavanaugh, but we are united as professors of law and scholars of judicial institutions in believing that he did not display the impartiality and judicial temperament requisite to sit on the highest court. Again, that published Just tonight in the New York Times, over 650 law professors signing on to it, including more than a dozen from Yale Law School, of which Brett Kavanaugh is a graduate. So tonight we await definitive word on the FBI background investigation into the sexual assault allegations against Kavanaugh. We await news of that FBI report, honestly, without any clarity as to what the FBI actually looked at in that investigation. At this point, if the shoe was on the other foot and the FBI was investigating a Democratic president's Supreme Court nominee, and the head of the FBI was that nominee's law school classmate, like FBI Director Chris Wray is to Brett Kavanaugh, and the Deputy Attorney General overseeing the probe is an old co-worker of the nominee who showed up at his hearing to support his nomination, as Rod Rosenstein did for Brett Kavanaugh. If the shoe was on the other foot, you could imagine how nuts Republicans would be going over the character of the FBI investigation at this point in the consideration of that nominee. But Democrats don't pressure the FBI the way that Republicans do. Matt Miller, who's a former Department of Justice spokesman, has a very powerful op-ed that's just posted today at Politico.com, lamenting this difference in the dynamic. Do we have that op-ed that we can show a picture of? Thank you. Lamenting that difference in the way Democrats and Republicans handle these matters. So Democrats don't pressure the FBI the way the Republicans do. We're all waiting for the FBI investigation. Republicans would be crowing about it like you can't believe. Democrats appear to just be waiting for it. Who knows if we will ever see, for example, those 302s from the FBI investigation? Who knows if the FBI at this point feels any political pressure in terms of what they're doing or what they might report, other than the pressure they're certainly feeling from the Republican-controlled Congress and the aggressively out-of-its-lane Republican-controlled White House? But tonight, we are waiting to hear about the outcome of that process. And while we are awaiting that word, which could come at any moment, one of the senators from the Judiciary Committee will join us next. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.